As you can see, he's highlighted in a big yellow box the gap where the long ending would go. Okay, so we all clear on what the argument is here. This is probably about to semi-blow your mind, but it cuts now to Gnostic Informant, who's basically saying, this is a Billy Carson level bullcrap lie. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle your seatbelts. It's about to get wacky.
Evidence exists, he says. That was a Billy Carson level
bull crap lie.
Said,
and this is a feature. Remember, he said this is a feature that we don't see at the end of any other Gospels. You can look up these codexes online and read them. It's like he just didn't even check. Like, there's a gap at the end of every single Gospel. Pretty bad, right?
I agree, and I think...
But you know what? It's about to get worse. What is Wes Huff's PhD in? Do you remember? Paratextual features of New Testament manuscripts. So not about the content of the text, but stuff to do with the way that the manuscripts are written. You know, like the handwriting, the layout, this kind of stuff. So in other words, this kind of stuff. Like, this is squarely within his expertise.
Yes.
Paratextual features of New Testament documents. And yet he's managed to make a genuinely, to me, unfathomable blunder. I do not understand how you can make a video where you say that there's a gap at the end of Mark's Gospel in Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, and that's something we don't see in any of the other Gospels. If you have copies of those codexes and you can look and see that there are gaps at the end of every single one of them, I do not understand how you make that blunder. I genuinely don't get it.
On top of that, if we account for the average space between the letters, the average amount of words per column, and the approximate letter size for the scribe who wrote the Gospel of Mark, and we factor all that in and fill in the gap with a reconstructed text, 16:9 through 20 and the standard title inscription for the Gospel according to Mark fits exactly in the space left at the end of Mark in Codex Vaticanus. I think that's very important to take note of.
Fits exactly in the space. I think that's very important to take note of.
These are texts that I'm pretty familiar with.
Seriously, look at the Omicron. Look at how small the reconstruction is with the red underlining. And then look over on the left and how large in the space. That's not average. That is clearly compression. And that is absolutely what James Snap does.
But you can see here how I have reconstructed the text of Mark 16:9-20 in the blank space. Now, the lettering is slightly compressed.
For the average space between the letters, the average amount of words per column, and the approximate letter size for the scribe who wrote the Gospel of Mark.
And these letters were not made by me, but basically I went over the Codex Vaticanus on this page and cut and pasted the text of Mark 16:9-20, letter by letter, using the scribe's own lettering. So here you can see that with compression, this text of Mark 16:9-20 and a closed title fits in the blank space.
Why? Because our reputation is being torn apart by a bunch of people who have no clue what they're talking about. They put a blindfold on and said, Wes, where are you? Wes, what'd you say, Wes? I believe you, Wes. No, shut up. I believe you, Wes. That's what happened to us, and we're a little bit ticked off on realizing how honestly dumb so many people are. That's exactly what they are. I'm so frustrated with how dumb so many people are online, bro. I'm not even kidding you. I'm like, my hope in humanity is like, dude, where are we going? Where are we freaking going, bro? Ladies and gentlemen, Wes Huff just recently dropped a discussion on facsimile after facsimile after facsimile after book after book after book after facsimile, getting ahead of a recent large interview with Alex O'Connor and it's Julian Dory. He has a massive podcast, and someone tipped him off. I'm pretty confident that his reputation on the line. Why? Context. He was so wrong in a video that he did, first throwing punches at Neal. We never did till after he called you dishonest.
I didn't know who he was before that.
Right. He had 30,000 subs.
Yeah.
So he hit you, and you just were like, you were on Danny.
I already had my check mark in my group, my whatever you call it,
Yeah.
plaque. Yeah.
So he's on Danny Jones.
Yeah.
He punches up, okay? And then you're like, hold on, who's this guy on my radar? And he's making crap up. So you caught him with the long ending of Mark's stuff. He definitely didn't do a good job articulating what his point was, if this was his point all along in the video that he just did.
Right.
However, he really goofed up and had to delete the video, never apologized to you. Alex sees this.
Because of the Alexandrinus thing, I think. That was the biggest. Putting that on the screen and going, look how big these gaps are. They must have had knowledge of later, when it had the long ending in it.
Yes.
Was like, that was the end of that video. That video was, no matter what happens after that, you messed up so royally. It was cool. It was smart to take it down.
It was smart, but here's the thing.
Leave that up.
No, you're right. Alexandrinus, so those who don't know, is a 5th century document. We're going to cover a little bit more on Stephen's charts. We'll get there. But this is the problem. That codex has the long ending in it, and he circles the space after the long ending's already inserted, which is so obviously ridiculous. And even Alex was pointing it out, like really emphasizing this on Julian Dory's podcast.
But in between the time they recorded and the time it got released, Wes quickly uploaded a video kind of reaffirming his stance.
Yeah.
And all he really does is just shift the goalpost just a tad, to the point where now he's in the clear. Now he goes, well, yeah, those other ones have gaps at the end, but it's not the same as this gap right here.
Right.
And yeah, some of them do have similar gaps to this one, but they're not in the New Testament of this particular manuscript.
Yeah.
So you literally he limits his sample size to 27 books instead of going with the sample size that you should use, which is the same codex.
Okay, so we're now jumping in the deep end, right? So first of all, if you don't know Neal Sendlak from Gnostic Informant and my buddy Stephen Nelson from Cross Bible, crossbible.com, start using the Bible at Cross Bible, scratch Bible Hub. This is going to be the place to go, and you're going to see why as we continue to roll out good scholarship and show you why this is the place. Anywho, that being said, recently, he was tipped off, and for reputation's sake, I am interpreting it as for reputational sake. Here I am, a PhD candidate in Canada, wanting to be, the facsimile master and the, what does he call himself? The para,
specialist, yeah.
Yeah, para specialist.
He is a bona fide, or at least he's earning his PhD in the paratextual features of the New Testament. And so he's doing a good job with that. We just want to correct the record on a few things in the recent video.
Yes. So we're going to correct the record, but let's all up front just say, amen, Brother Wes. It is a forgery. And we're thankful that you recognize that and admit and confess that, yeah, hey, Christians, if you think verse 9 through 20 of Mark 16 was original, think again, okay? Now, the real question in the scandal becomes, what else in the New Testament is forgery, other than the adulterous woman potentially? I know that you're willing to go somewhere, but can you follow us into the pseudepigraphic letters of Paul, or can you do some of the, okay, so we have some territories they're not willing to go into because it breaks the conservative Christian position. Okay, what does Wes do in this video? He admits that it's not original, but it sounds like he's wrestling with this, but it's an early forgery. Something's going on. We talked to Richard Carrier. Richard Carrier was like, dude, it sounds like his Christian constituency was like, you better go out there and at least make us look good. And I'm like, you don't understand the background, Dr. Carrier. There's more behind the scenes about what happened with Neal and why he made this video. Because it seemed like, what is the point of this video other than, here's my real position. Don't listen to this video that Derek and Neal did on me. Okay.
Right, but it was also very, very, very sneaky little move to go. And this is a feature that doesn't exist in anywhere else in the New Testament.
So we need
and it
to
was
talk about
like that part right there really bothered me the most in this whole video, because it was him sneakily saying, if I create my own sample size, then my argument works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, that's not how you should know the methodology by now. You should know that you shouldn't be dividing up text based on making certain look different than the new. Right.
So technically, just so you understand what Neal's trying to say is this. When Wes is not incorrect, he is correct in his statement. What he doesn't just say to the audience that we felt he should have, especially after our investigation when Neal left last night, was this. He says in the New Testament, you only find this third column blank, right? He's correct about that. But the Codex is one large book, including.
I think you're not. So the background information here is we're talking about Codex Vaticanus.
Yeah.
And the defining feature of the ending of Mark of Codex Vaticanus that everybody's talking about right now, which we all agree on.
Yeah.
We agree with Wes. Like, we're not arguing against the conclusion of this video that something is going on. Something's definitely going on.
Yeah.
But what's going on?
What's
so
going on?
what's going on is that at the end of Mark, it's a 3-column Codex Vaticanus. The third column on the right is totally empty. And the conclusion is that this is evidence that the scribe of Codex Vaticanus knew about the long ending, thought it was probably a forgery, but left some space for reasons that we'll get into, or or speculate on, and that this is a feature that doesn't exist anywhere else in the New Testament portion of Codex Vaticanus, but it does exist in 3 parts in the Old Testament, which was not mentioned, and it was, I guess, not considered relevant. But the 3 places are the end of Second Esdras, the end of Tobit, and
Third Esdras.
Third Esdras, the end of Tobit,
And Daniel, which you already mentioned.
and the end of Daniel, which is the end of the Old Testament portion of Codex Vaticanus, which is interesting. And then, there are valid explanations for why there would be gaps in the Old Testament, right before the Psalms, right before the minor prophets. It's fine.
Yeah, like in the Psalms, they have 2 columns rather than 3.
Yeah.
So they switched from 3 columns into 2 columns, starting on a new leaf, so to speak.
It's not enough. There's enough of it going on to say that I don't know if I can make any conclusion.
Yeah,
on
I
Mark
want to make it
basis.
dogmatic.
Yeah.
Right, and we agree. But the thing is
I don't have a problem with him bringing this up,
Dude,
but
here's
it
the
is.
thing.
It was what was irritating to me is that he just shifted his argument into that pocket to be
didn't
safe.
mention the other thing.
Yeah, to be safe from the criticism that he was getting before.
Okay, here's the thing. I think we all might actually sit back and go, you know what? Maybe this gap potentially does maybe say, hey, there's something weird going on with Mark and they left a blank. Here's where I want to get pedantic. Join me on this journey. Are you ready? Okay. He shows the blank space. You can see on the screen, and we'll have a screen recording where you can actually see us show you. You see the stamp from the library online of this facsimile. You can see that watermark. Well, when he adds in, he says, and this is it's not completely honest, okay? This is not completely accurate, and this is, you read your motives however you want. Let you, the viewer, decide, okay? But in it, he says that the space size, the size of the actual letters of the Greek and stuff fit perfectly in this blank space.
16:9 through 20, and the standard title inscription for the Gospel according to Mark fits exactly in the space left at the end of Mark in Codex Vaticanus.
Well, when you actually fact check where this comes from, which is James Snap's website, James Snap reconstructed it. He's using James Snap's reconstruction. What James Snap tells you that Wes does not tell you, and he should have if he's going to be thorough, is this. He literally fabricated by compressing, going through Mark and finding the smallest letters and then like copying and pasting to recreate a insertion of 9 through 20. And it is totally speculative, number one. James is literally reducing numbers that are spelled out into single digits. Like, he says, hi, I've compressed this. But what does Wes say? If you just take the normal spaces and the normal size.
If we account for the average space between the letters, the average amount of words per column, and the approximate letter size for the scribe who wrote the Gospel of Mark, and we factor all that in and fill in the gap with a reconstructed text, 16:9 through 20, and the standard title inscription for the Gospel according to Mark fits exactly in the space left at the end of Mark in Codex Vaticanus.
No. He admits he compresses it. That's a bit sneaky to me. That's just a bit dishonest, or I'll just say ignorance, okay? And I don't know where to land on this. I'm trying to be fair. We just heard him say it fits exactly in the space, when the space between those letters and the size of the approximate size of the Greek letters used by Vaticanus actually fits in that space exactly. he uses this language all the time. In the past, it was word for word, all these things. So when you go and check out the actual facsimile here on like Vatican Apostolica Vaticana, and you look at the site, which by the way, keep in mind this watermark right here where it says all rights reserved. Notice the space, right? This is the one he uses in his shot when he inserts this edition. You can see it on the left.
Reconstructed text.
Watch what he does.
16:9 through 20.
You can see there's no watermark, right? And notice the red color for each of the chapter breaks, or not chapter, verse breaks. So you can see 9, 10, 11. Well, here's the interesting part. This has actually already been created by this guy, James Snap, as we're talking about. You can see here, this doesn't have the watermark like this on the right. So he must have used an image from here. However, you could see he's got the numbering system the same, exactly from James Snap. James Snap says these aren't the right space and the exact, average size of what he does in the rest of Mark. He has to find rare examples where he uses small letters and really squeezes it in here. So let's zoom in, for example, first of all, on his actual article. So you can see that what Wes should have done, if he was to be careful, is to point out what Snap is doing. So this fits perfect, right? It's nice and snug because these are compacted. These are not what they actually are throughout Codex Vaticanus in Mark. This is a reconstructed compacting. This is not what Mark did. And he changes, like, instead of spelling out the word 7 or other numbers, he literally just gives a single digit code. Kind of like today, if I was writing 7 in a sentence, I might just put the number 7 instead of SEVEN. So in Greek, you can spell it out or shorten it. And Snap points out that if the scribe wanted to snugly fit it, he could if he compacted it to squeeze it in. The other academics, and even Snap points this out, it would have been too long. This gap is clearly too small to allow for the long ending. And guess what? This comes from Daniel Wallace, a bona fide Christian apologist, literally saying, nah, it's too long. So you can actually see of other reconstructions where they say the very same thing. They say that based on actually measuring it on the rest of what he does on this page on the left, right, in the center column, if you measure the rest of this empty space using the same measurements of the Greek here, it would be 67 letters, 67 Greek letters too long. He says that up here, 67 Greek letters in 1620. So the point is, this doesn't snugly fit. And so the fact that Wes made it sound like if you just put the reconstruction of the Greek as if you're looking to the left, it would fit snugly perfectly. No, Snap is reconstructing it and he's crunching it together. Look how tight those letters are. And you can compare things like the Omicron and Alpha and stuff like that and seeing the spaces on the left versus what he's doing on purpose to make it fit. But you can make anything fit. You could probably find a way, if you scrunched all the Greek letters on this entire page into that one section, if you squeeze them tight enough. I'm just being funny, of course. So I want you to see that when he makes that statement,
if we account for the average space between the letters, the average amount of words per column, and the approximate letter size for the scribe who wrote the Gospel of Mark, and we factor all that in and fill in the gap with a reconstructed text, 16:9 through 20, and the standard title inscription for the Gospel according to Mark fits exactly in the space left at the end of Mark in Codex Vaticanus. I think that's very important to take note of.
that's based on Snap, and Snap is reconstructing it by compressing. That is not an accurate measurement of what the Greek words are around. Wes just leaves that out. He doesn't mention he gets this from Snap, though we have evidence to prove it's from his website, where you can see him using the same exact numbering system. See the red numbering system? That's what Wes uses. Why not mention that? Just say, why not mention this is a compressed reconstruction? Not, oh, well, you take the normal letter space and the normal letter size. It sounds dishonest. So either he doesn't know, didn't care to mention, or he's hip firing and he made a mistake. Again, another mistake, a word for word mistake. Okay. or he's just being dishonest. And I'm trying not to give him those labels. I'm literally trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. So I hope everybody takes a good look at this. You can go check this for yourself. It took us 10, 15 minutes to discover this. But of course, we've chewed on this since last night, done a lot more research since then. And yeah, come on, do better, in my opinion. And you know this. Me and you, Steven, last night I was a little bit hyped, and I'm like, okay, hold on. Let me chill out. Maybe he really did make a mistake. But he should say who he got this image from. James Snap's
He's also not a PhD in the particular field, but he does do a lot of work.
It's a 2016 blog post where he clearly explains, he puts everything, all his cards are on the table. So he mentions that.
And by the way, I actually, from reading James Snap, he knows what he's talking about, and he seems like a legitimate scholar, even though he doesn't have a PhD. So I don't want to like try to poison the well by saying he doesn't have a PhD, because he does seem like he knows what he's talking about. But
we don't have any dispute with the original blog post from 2016 by James Snap Jr., where he put all this together. He admits that, yes, there are gaps in the Old Testament, but there are reasonable explanations why they're there.
Yep.
Yes, if he says specifically, if you use the letter sizes and the spacing between the words that you get in that left column, it doesn't fit.
It doesn't.
It's going to be a little over. But he admits, if you compress it and you reduce and you can see this in the document, right? That the omega, the letter omega in that left column is like this. The one that he picks out and copies and pastes, it's a small omega. He reduces the space between the words. But Wes Huff says that if you take the average spacing between the words, this is what you get, like, mathematically. I'm going to go out on a limb and just say, like, I think he's just mistaken. I think,
hip
firing. I think a correction would be warranted. I'm not accusing him of lying. I think, again, we agree with, like, the conclusion.
And we even possibly agree that, maybe this little blank space might be indicating something. However, we don't draw it as definitive. We aren't highly, highly confident. But here's the thing. We're going to get into your map and show that too.
But at the end of the day, these are 4th century manuscripts anyway.
Exactly the point.
So it's like,
we're going to cover that.
Can it have that?
Of course it can.
Can they be knowledgeable of the other one? Yes.
Yeah, but
ultimately, it comes down to citing sources, right? That's the responsible thing to do. James Snap went to the effort of meticulously compressing the text to make this fit and producing this high quality image.
The standard.
Just give him credit. You know. So
my hypothesis behind that is that I think the reason why I didn't give him credit is because he's probably thinking of people like us who would go, if I cite this guy who doesn't have a PhD, they're going to say it's not credible.
Well,
but he should have still cited his source.
Also, James Snap has a reputation as being a defender of the long ending. But just for the record, James Snap thinks that the long ending was forged. He just thinks it was forged very close to the original composition of the Gospel of Mark, and he has an elaborate explanation. You should go check him out.
Yeah.
But that's. I don't know.
The description.
I don't know if Wes Huff agrees with James Snap. He just doesn't. He doesn't acknowledge that he got it from him, and he doesn't acknowledge, like, if he agrees with him or not.
Just so we're factual.
Other scholars have tried to do the math, and it says there's not enough space.
Right. This is exactly the point. So I'm glad you brought this up. Finishing that topic, because we can move to another issue. Okay, because there's more issues. Is this? When you actually factor in, using Wes's own words, that the normal spaces that you can actually see in Codex Vaticanus on the left and above where the insertion of this James Snap thing is, you'll notice that they actually, by that calculation, would say it's 4 lines, 67 Greek words too long. It does not fit. You have to do what James Snap did, and that's compress, squeeze, and by finding the littlest things you can throughout Mark in Codex Vaticanus. Here's my point. He should have been much more careful as the facsimile master that he is, and he should have been much more cautious, knowing, hey, this is my reputation. I won't apologize publicly about what I did to Neal, but I'll do it for a Joe Rogan podcast to get everyone off my back. I have 500,000 Christians cheering for the Heracles of Christ, which is him, the new Messiah, as Alex O'Connor calls him. And I just think he should have been a little more careful. He got the heads up, he got the tip, and we're gonna fact check it. We're gonna.
And it's just the whole thing about this whole video was just basically him covering his ass, acknowledging the scholarship, acknowledging the consensus, but then throwing up smoke and mirrors throwing up more smoke and mirrors, going, but there's something going on, but I know that it's not there, but I know there's something going on. The whole video was just back and forth between winking at scholars, saying, I got you, scholars, I got your back. And then with the other eyeball, winking at the Christians in the crowd, going, don't worry, there's something going on, definitely.
Well, I just want to comment on that to say, I think that we wouldn't have so much to pick on if he just honestly, publicly said, hey, Neal, you know what? I really did.
No, you got me. You got me.
Yeah, I made a mistake on the Alexandrinus. I am the PhD candidate. And, we don't really have anything personally against Wes. In fact, I mean, I don't. I think the dude's probably a decent guy. Like, we just never met him at all. We're just poking. Okay, we're poking at someone.
Well, this is our domain.
Look at my books. Check this out.
You should criticize our videos if it comes across them.
Yeah.
So we're in the same domain.
So we agree the long ending, short ending existed by the time that these codexes, plural, already being written. You get Jerome and Eusebius already talking about it, and they existed before these codexes are on the scene. Whoever the scribes, if you will, that are writing these codexes, they're working off something, and potentially they see a long ending or a short ending, and they're like, hey, we'll leave this blank. We are willing to say that could be the case. We're just not dying on the hill of like, absolutely, and this is it. However, you have a map here. Can people get that? Not a map, a graph timeline, really. This has been years in the making. Did you want to roll this out and show everyone what's going on?
Yeah. So, basically, look, we've watched this video. It's a 20-minute video. We watched it several times. Really, it boils down to, I'll roll in a second. What is the thesis of this video? The thesis of this video is that something is going on. If you play a drinking game with this video, take a shot every time Wes Huff says something's going on. We know something's going on. And what's going on, just so it's clear, the thesis, is that the scribes in the 4th century know that there are multiple versions of the ending of the Gospel of Mark.
Right.
The middle column, by the way, in that empty space in the beginning could probably even fit the short ending, right? Yeah. So there's a short ending, there's a long ending, and there are lots of variations on it. So if you look at the timeline of the Bible on crossbible.com, just go to crossbible, look for the timeline. It's crossbible.com/timeline.
Get you one of these.
You can find a digital version of this, and you can also order a poster. So there's an example of the poster. So what we see here is basically the default, what you're going to find from the 1st century when the New Testament was composed, over into the 3rd century when we have our earliest papyrus evidence, right? And then into the 4th and 5th centuries and 6th centuries when we get our first unsealed texts, right? Actual codices of the Bible written in uppercase letters. You get already pretty early on a big variety in the ending of Mark, right? So what we have here is we have no ending, right? In Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, right? Our earliest, considered to be most reliable 4th century codices that really changed the whole landscape of Bible publishing, right? Like once these started to pop onto the scene, in scholarship, in 19th century and 20th century scholarship, basically all of our modern Bibles follow these codices, but they also follow Codex Alexandrinus to some degree, which has the long ending, right? So basically, we know for a fact our earliest evidence for the long ending is the 5th century. So it's not improbable. Yeah, it's not improbable that in the 4th century there are scribes aware of the existence of this long ending because we know it existed at least by the 5th century. We also have it here. We also have it here in Latin. So plenty of evidence in the 5th century of the long ending. Of course, it was floating around in the 4th century. Probably the short ending was also floating around, but it's not just these 2 Greek manuscripts that are lacking the ending completely, right? Those are the earliest Greek unseals that we have, but we also have, this is the Syriac Sinaiticus. And we have in Syriac a copy missing the long ending, missing the ending completely. And we have no ending in Codex Bobiensis, which is a Latin manuscript, which is probably the 4th or the 5th century. So it's not just those 2 Greek witnesses. And then, of course, we have Codex Washingtonianus has the long ending plus, so it has some additions to the long ending. And that's probably 4th or 5th century. We got this codex long ending, and basically this entire group is going to be long ending, right? So the vast majority of manuscripts have the long ending, but the vast majority of manuscripts are pretty late in the Byzantine textual tradition. And then we have short ending, right? This is like 5th century, 6th century, and over 100 Armenian manuscripts with no ending, right? Shout out to Ruslan. Armenian manuscripts and Georgian manuscripts. So it's not just that we have 2 witnesses for no ending and that all the rest are long ending. It's all over the map, really. So the idea that the scribe cut off Mark at what they believed was the original ending, which is 16:8, but left room in case, for whatever reason, for the long ending to be squeezed in, and it would have had to be squeezed in. And if they eyeballed it, maybe they thought it would fit. We can't really speculate on what their motivations were.
We can't know, is your point. And
Yeah.
and maybe they did, and we have no problem with that. But making that assumption, and it feels like, again, like, what if? Like, there's this weird, what's the point of this video at the end of the day? Then he goes into Sinaiticus, and he talks about the weird symbols, and one's 6 centimeters, and then the others are 2 centimeters and stuff. It's like,
Yeah, at that point, I was checked out.
yeah, it's
And
like,
we're just looking for something to go, this one has a different thing going on. Like,
yeah,
this one has a different feeling, so therefore we should just be aware something's going on.
yeah.
Like, it's just I was so mentally checked out when he's comparing how they had their X's and stuff. I'm like, I'm out.
And then now we need
Lost
to talk
me.
about Gar. Okay, this is important.
So he just confidently states, as if he's like an expert in Greek, the sentence ends in the word gar, which is the Greek word for four. That's very strange. And of course, yeah, that's very true. And it was like, no, it's not. Actually, we've seen multiple examples of passages or even full books ending with the word gar, because in Greek, word order doesn't matter like in English. In English, you wouldn't end with the word for, but in Greek, you could end with the word gar because the word order doesn't necessarily mean anything. But if I'm not mistaken, he's right that statistically, it's not. We don't find that many examples in the long grand scheme of Greek. However, grammatically, there's nothing wrong with ending on the word gar.
Yeah, so the example he gives is that you wouldn't end an English sentence with the word for.
And one of the arguments that is discussed is that the gospel in Greek ends with the conjunction gar, which in English we translate as for. Now, it has often been thought that this is unlikely that a book would end with the word for. It just is awkward grammatically, and that's true. Like, you wouldn't end a sentence in English with the word for, and you also, although word order is less important in Greek, it's still kind of messy to end with the word gar in Greek.
That's true. That would be a violation of English grammar. However, the word gar, it means for, it means because, it is explaining what was previously stated, right? It is called post-positive. So you never begin a sentence with gar. That's against the rules, right?
So it's not like therefore.
Yeah, you give the first word, like a definite article, and then you put gar after that, right? So that's what post-positive means. Now, what he is saying is something that's been said in scholarship for a long time, that it is exceedingly rare to end a sentence with gar because God is all over the place. It's such a common word, and it usually doesn't end sentences. And it especially is very rare to end narratives, right? You don't end a book with God most of the time.
But we have some examples of that.
But yeah, so we have examples of basically ending, and we'll show these on screen because I screenshot all of these. We have examples. First of all, the example that Wes Huff gives is Plato's Republic, which immediately contradicts what he says, because if Plato's Republic has it, that's Attic Greek. You know that's already
That's the best Greek you're going to get.
Yeah. So if Plato can get away with it, everybody has
Mark
Plato.
can get away with it.
Yeah, Mark can totally get away with it.
That would mean the long-standing scholarly idea that gar, all that shouldn't end that way, that's just a misnomer. You should not make that claim as an academic. So if he's regurgitating what other academics have been saying, stop listening to those academics who are saying that when Plato himself, the chief dude that Christians looked up to and found ways to make into a Christian, because they're philosophically inspired by him.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a misconception. So basically, you have a sentence ending in gar in Plato's Republic, book 1, line 350. You have also Plato's Protagoras, 328d. We have Plotinus's Ennead, book 5, 525. We have Musonius Rufus's Dissertation 12. And we have Lucian's Courtesan Dialogue, section 6.
The great emphasizer.
Yeah, so so really high-level Greek authors are ending sentences, ending sections with gar. The whole idea that Mark is writing gutter Greek, that Mark's Greek is bad, that Mark's Greek is awkward, and he begins a lot of sentences with Kai. That's a very popular. I think it's a myth. I'm not really convinced about it because I think he could be intentionally writing that way. It's not necessarily that he is incapable of writing Atticizing higher level.
You get that type of using the word Kai to begin the sentence. You find that in the Septuagint a lot.
Yeah,
So he might be trying to sound like a Septuagint author.
I think it might be deliberate. I wouldn't split hairs over it. I wouldn't stake my reputation over it. But I'm not a scholar, so I leave that to scholars. I just think the whole idea that no, it couldn't be end in God. James Snap Jr.'s theory is that it ends in God because the original author got interrupted.
Yeah.
And he thinks that the long ending was forged by somebody else shortly after he composed it. So that is his position as far as I'm aware.
It seemed like Stephen Boyce's position somewhat was like that too. That
They add so many steps to get to their, they do the exact opposite of good methodology. Like they add narratives. Well, he must have been in the middle of writing, and then the earthquake happened, and then he fell from a story.
Tell us why you think Wes Huff actually originally responded to you.
Well, I think the video. This is what I personally. This is just he asked me this out of the blue, so I don't really know. But
the original video.
The original video is because Danny Jones and me. That video has 1 million views. It was going like mini viral, and it was getting a lot of attention on Instagram for some reason. All the little clips that Denny made. That was one of the clips. So he just wanted to jump on the bandwagon of people doing commentary videos against me.
If I could add to that, he does say so himself. It seems he's very irritated by Neal's insisting the idea that Jesus did not rise physically from the grave, right?
Yeah.
So
that's what you're getting at. The theological reason? Yeah.
Theological, but that's also the reason I think these long endings keep popping up is there is this.
Yeah. That's right. He wanted to establish that what I'm saying about the oldest gospel not telling that there's a physical resurrection is wrong, and that there was a physical resurrection, blah, 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 blah. Yes.
And now, just so that we weave that in and make that clear, you're not saying that the body didn't raise according to the text. You're saying there are no post-resurrection appearances.
That's it.
There is no accounts of what happened, what kind of actual body Jesus had.
My whole point to Danny Jones was to say that the first time somebody sat down and wrote a story about Jesus, the gospel, the first gospel, Mark. In that first original story, we do not get any narrative about Jesus returning and being touched physically.
Right. Okay.
That was my whole point.
That was your point.
So for the record, the actual ending of Mark 16 that we can reliably reconstruct in the critical text, I'm going to read it from crossbible.com in the NASB. It's the young man says to them, "Do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See, here is the place where they laid him. But go and tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." And they went out and fled the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them, and they said nothing to no one, for they were afraid. Efovundolgar.
End.
Period.
Right.
And that was my big point to Danny, was like, this is the first time the story is being told, and there's no idea of them touching Jesus's body. We don't know what his physical body looks like anymore. We never see it. That's it.
Based on Mark alone, you cannot. This is what I think apologists do. Again, with what we're talking about with Vaticanus, what we're talking about. So you're telling me there's a chance, okay?
Right.
And well, in the text, the angel says that where he said he was going to meet you, go there.
But what is so crazy about what he's asking me though is that now that I think about why you're asking me this, his original video is completely void now. Like, he's no longer making the same argument anymore.
Yeah.
He's gone from saying, well, no, there really is a physical idea, here's why, to not being like, yeah, he's right, but there's also a bunch of this smoke and mirrors.
Well, again, I just think that what Christians do is they see Matthew, they see Luke, they see John, and they look at Mark and go, we don't need to worry about the fact that Mark is so scandalous. And me, because I don't have the dogma or creed that I must.
Because we live in a time where everyone presupposes these gospels are all unified. Why not?
Exactly. They're univocal. And for me, in my mind, I'm going, I'm willing and capable of asking questions that will get you kicked out of church and go, what if? What if? Because here's the thing. I think we all would agree that his body's out of the grave now, if we get into the physical thing. But Paul says flesh and blood will not inherit the kingdom of God. So whatever body he has, even if the physical one is gone, it now is something different than just flesh and blood.
Yeah.
It has to be more than just purely, oh, it's just flesh and blood. It's immortalized, whatever the hell that means, or whatever the heaven that really means.
But we would agree that the Corinthian Creed and Paul's accounts of the appearances of Jesus, this all predates Mark, right? And Mark's aware of it.
Well, Nina lies. He's starting to.
Okay, but I mean, but at least that's our position currently.
Like
it's
I still hold that position.
Yeah. So
it's easy to. Yeah. So the whole Wes Huff thing from day one, he poked at you to defend his faith. He didn't like what you said on Danny Jones at 30,000 subs. He goes after Billy Carson and ends up, I think making some good points, some valid criticisms.
Struck gold with Billy Carson.
Oh, he struck real gold. But at the same time, I think, again, here we are with Genesis and its dependence on earlier myths and stuff. He's just kind of apologetics, okay? So he gets famous overnight from that. He deletes the video he did with you. Alex O'Connor sees this in light of the fact that Alex made a criticizing video because on Joe Rogan, he makes word for word, word for word, word for word. And then every Christian under the sun, not every single one, but a lot of them came around and went, you know what he meant? He didn't mean word for word. He meant word for word.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
But he issued a video correcting the record. I would hope he would issue a video correcting the record here and just giving credit to James Snap for the image, for
saying, hey, Neal, you were right. I was wrong about that first video.
Yeah. Or I made the first video without the full context. I reacted to a short. I didn't react to the whole thing. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't.
It doesn't matter even then, though. He should have corrected himself publicly and said, look, I had Alex Andrinus on the screen, was making a gotcha, and I messed up as a human here. He's willing to do it for Joe Rogan. Look, we make mistakes.
Yeah, he's never actually publicly said a word about the Alex Andrinus thing.
No.
That's a big goof. That's worse than the Dead Sea Scrolls that he got all his attention for. Well, maybe. Is it worse? I don't know. They're both pretty bad. But the idea that the Dead Sea Scrolls are all, it's exactly the same word for word.
Just that
the Isaiah scroll. That's what I meant. Yeah. But putting Alex Andrinus on the screen as if that long ending, or as if that gap means that's a bad, I don't know which one's worse actually, but still.
At the end of the day.
Still think he would say something about it.
At the end of the day, if the goal of apologetics is to sort of build up faith in the reliability of the text, right?
Defend the faith.
Defend the faith and defend the reliability of scripture. And I get that. I don't think it was worthwhile to do that based on a single manuscript of Isaiah. It should have been done based on the preservation of the Masoretic text family in general, right?
Yeah.
That we can reconstruct from the Dead Sea Scrolls and the discoveries in the Judean desert. I think there were better arguments to reach for that. And also, the whole idea about engaging in apologetics to resuscitate the longer ending of Mark, it doesn't need it. Like, you don't need that. Because we should actually have some of a high level of confidence in the conclusions of the last 2 centuries of scholarship, which is just bracket that textual variant, right? Like, make sure it's clear that this is early, we're keeping it in the body of the text, but we're flagging this as probably not by the original hand of the author. If you're going to make a video about it, that conclusion should be very, very clear, because we don't want to throw out all these modern Bibles, right? Like, they're all built on a pretty decent foundation of modern textual criticism, and a big goal of like the Cross Bible Project is bringing modern textual criticism to the fore of scholarship.
What I noticed now is what apologetics is becoming this thing where instead of defending the faith and defending the source material and the transition from Paul's to the Church of Rome and all that stuff, instead of doing what apologetics has been doing for 2,000 years, it's now becoming this thing where it poses itself as being academically sound, following scholarship, following science, being like, okay, we believe in evolution now. We don't think the world was 6,000 years old, stuff like that. And then, but what it does is, and then it takes creative license in the gaps where things aren't settled yet. So it grants the things that are settled, and it plays in the balance of the game and plays by the rules. But then wherever there's any sort of room for creative ideas, they're in there. Yeah. Trying to figure out how to get their next thing.
One of the points that was made a few times in this video is that there's debate. there's debate around the long ending of Mark, and that there are smart people who are arguing for the authenticity of the long ending of Mark. If that's the case,
have a hard time.
I would really like to see a follow-up video
Or who the scholars are.
naming those scholars, putting their arguments forward,
Where the papers,
presenting
where's the
them.
papers, right?
Yeah, and
Link some papers.
yeah. Otherwise, you should really point out that this is actually a pretty firm consensus.
And just to be clear,
this is what Michael Jones was doing in his debate with
Cross.
Dr. Lawrence Cross. He kept saying multiple studies show that Christianity.
Religious people.
Yeah, but he kept. He was. That's another thing he was doing.
generically saying
He was citing scholarship about religious and happiness.
right.
But then he kept going. Multiple studies show that Christianity brings benefits. But he would never tell you what the study is. But so like, what? The crowd's like, whoa.
The other problem I found, I think,
Multiple studies said, yeah. Like,
I think the other problem that we found too is the generic religions. You know?
right.
And it's kind of interesting when you do see these isolated atheistic countries that have so much success and they have a really good like society that functions quite well. Those kind of get like, well, that's an exception. But when he pulls up these religious studies, he's not, when he uses the word, it's that kind of well, in the New Testament, we have this long blank, one place. And you're like, what about the 4 other times in the Old Testament? The whole calculation of all the data or being very careful about your argument, he'll carefully go religious, which means Buddhism, Hinduism,
That's what I
Islam,
mean.
like anyone.
He uses that as like now I have something I can use and anchor my argument based on this study that really doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about.
Right.
And that's what I mean. Like, apologetics has become this sort of like game of like trying to pose as being academically sound, but getting away with a bunch of shit at the same time.
So I want us all to just echo our personal opinions about this long ending. The earliest we have like clear mentions that there is that we know of patristic evidence is like Jerome and Eusebius is like obviously saying there is this longer ending. Now there are probably earlier hints at it. So we're willing to say it could be in the 2nd century somewhere that they added this in because they saw a problem very early on. We just aren't dying on the hill pretending it's being quoted by this guy and it's quoted by that guy when it doesn't seem like it's a quote. We're very cautious about that.
Yeah, I don't think Justin Martyr was based on even what Snap provided that Justin Martyr is not aware of it. But I think it's possible after Justin Martyr in late 2nd, early 3rd century, people could be starting to become aware of it.
It's somewhere probably in the late 2nd, middle to late 2nd being added.
But when they presented the Justin Martyr argument, that what does he say again? He said there's something in Justin Martyr where it says like meet the
Great Commission.
It sounded like he was quoting from Acts, I think.
But
Luke Acts, and then but they were like, oh, this is the long ending, and it was the long ending.
Right.
They were just trying to say it was. Yeah, it sounded similar.
Bruce Metzger's textual commentary points out Clement of Alexandria and Origen show no knowledge of the existence of these verses. The longer
ending. That's turn of the 3rd century.
Yeah.
Further back into 3rd century.
Furthermore, Eusebius and Jerome attest to that the passage was absent from almost all Greek copies of Mark known to them.
So we're talking late 3rd, 4th century.
So yeah, and it wouldn't shock me though if it was like already being produced. It just wasn't significant.
It just wasn't big yet, right?
Yeah. But notice we're being very cautious. We're not trying to like, hey guys, right there out of the 2nd century. And by the way, I'm not going to name names, but a friend called me today, and they were pointing out like, hey man, we're trying to point out that like we think there's a lot of this kind of stuff that happens throughout the New Testament, and I don't know if Wes realizes it, but the arguments of trying to go as early as you can with a forgery. You're really opening the door to allowing other forgeries to be very early on. And hey, more credit, because we do think there's a lot of additions and tweaks going on in the New Testament. So if again, the question I would leave for anyone is, if you can tell that they're willing to forge and add to a gospel, and they are, what else are they adding? What else is being forged very early on? What else are they early on? Since we want to die on this hill of making this an early thing, what else is there? And I guarantee you there's more. But
in the conclusion of the Nestle Lawn 28 and of Bruce Metzger's explanation for why they left it in, why it's bracketed and left in and not just completely erased, why do we still find it with brackets in the Bible? It is out of deference to the evident antiquity of the longer ending and its importance in the textual tradition of the gospel. The committee decided to include verses 9 through 20 as part of the text, but to include them in brackets. So, square brackets to indicate that they are the work of an author other than the evangelist. So it's there. It's there because it's very, very ancient church tradition, not because it's original. And Wes Huff says, I do not believe that this is inspired scripture.
We're in agreement. We're in agreement, but I don't think any of it's inspired, okay? But nonetheless, yeah, as far as it being original, it wasn't there. I want to make one last comment that Alex O'Connor brought up on Julian Dory's podcast. When me and Neal did our critique, I agree, and I'm thankful for someone like Alex who's like, we need to bring attention to this because he's been on the bad end of like Muhammad Hijab and really trollish type apologist types in the world. The behavior of the Christians who came into our chat talking about you and me under this video, when we were factually correct, we were 100% correct about our critique of what Wes did in that video. And they came underneath and just blind allegiance to the kind of a derogatory and obsession that was going on in the comments. Alex was like, that's just not right. That's why I think a necessary public apology, and even him speaking for his own audience saying, chill out, I was mistaken. I'm human. He did it for the Joe Rogan thing. We're asking the Christian to be humble when the Lord says to do that very thing. Why? Because our reputation is being torn apart by a bunch of people who have no clue what they're talking about. They put a blindfold on and said, Wes, where are you? Wes, what'd you say, Wes? I believe you, Wes. No, shut up. I believe you, Wes. That's what happened to us. And we're a little bit ticked off on realizing how honestly dumb so many people are. That's exactly what they are. I'm so frustrated with how dumb so many people are online, bro. I'm not even kidding you. I'm like, my hope in humanity is like, dude, where are we going? Where are we freaking going, bro? Like, any cult leader can stand up. If you agree in a line, that's it. There's no rationality. There's no critical thinking skills.
That's always the internet. The internet is a place where people who would normally be on their own in their little corner of whatever society they're in. But now all of a sudden there's a whole place where they can all get together in one spot from their different areas. And now there's 600 people who all think the same.
You believe like me?
Yeah.
You're right no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And I'm like, dude, come on. If I see someone who agrees with an ontological conclusion of mine and they make a mistake, you're wrong, dude. Why can't we be that way? So
you're right. And they only base they base them off of what they say on other things. Like, oh, that guy can't be right. Did you hear what he said about trans people? He can't be right. Like it's so silly how people think about how people judge other people's claims.
Exactly. Based on their authority figure.
Based on who they are and what their vibes are or whatever,
Yeah. So anyway, Wes Huff, look, man, we got buried with hate by Christians. We got buried with hate. Do us a favor, bro. Make a public announcement. You made a mistake. Let's squash this crap and move forward. That's where we're at, man. We don't want to keep...
By the way, in case you were wondering, we got the Indiana Jones hats on because we're going on our pilgrimage.
Yeah, we're about to catch a flight to Athens, Greece to shoot some footage for our channels and make some cool discoveries.
Stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned. Subscribe to Gnostic Informant. Subscribe to Cross Bible. My friend Stephen Nelson. My friend Neal Sendlak. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed. And never forget, we are MythVision. And you just have attained true gnosis.